picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Calling all adventure fans. Calling all Dick Tracy fans. Stand by. Dick Tracy is on the air.
Well, good morning. Welcome. It is time for another build. It is, about the fourth week in January. It's getting kind of late. Getting cold outside. And that means my modeling options are getting limited because can't do a lot of priming outside. It's just too cold. And I also cannot do a lot of resin sanding because that has to be done either outside or vented to outside because of the dust that it raises, and I can't do that either as cold as it is. I was going through this, I was deep into the stash this weekend, the long holiday weekend, trying to figure out what I could build. I wanted to build something that I need to get back into ships. I have did some figures, did some monsters, did some hardware. Wanted to get back into ships, but then my options become more and more limited because of weather conditions. And so I figured, what's the most unusual kit that I've got? What is the weirdest off-the-wall thing that I have that may not... I know that there are certain types of builds that I can tell by my viewing numbers, not that I pay much attention to those, but I can tell that figures aren't as popular as kits, and I can tell that certain kits or certain subjects aren't as popular as others. You know what? I really don't care about that. I build what I want to build, and sometimes it's a popular thing, sometimes it isn't. But I wanted to find what's the most offbeat, unusual thing that I have in my stash, and I kind of came up with this. This is the Dick Tracy Space Coupe. I don't know why I have this. It is such an unusual and odd thing that it's an old Polar Lights kit. I looked at the instructions. The instructions dated at the year 2000. So it's a 20-year-old kit. I don't know why I have it. It's in my stash. I'm sure I picked it up at Wonderfest or saw it on a site somewhere. But I'm looking at it. It's a neat little kit. Now, I've got no dog in this fight. I got no great love of Dick Tracy or his Space Coupe. So, I may not paint it exactly as it's supposed to be. I think I'm going to do a little bit of adapting and having some fun with it. But that's this week's victim. And we're back on the tripod, and here you can see the paltry, small number of parts that this kit takes up. And the other thing nice about this is that it will not take up much shelf space, which is becoming more and more an issue, a factor these days. You can see the small number of parts, the requisite googly eyes, because I'm going to be doing some adapting. I'm going to play with some lighting on this thing too, because the Space Coupe has a police ball getting instructions, has a police gumball at the top, but I'm not going to use the circuit like I did on the Wallace and Gromit car. I'm just going to use what Emmons Lighting calls a breathing blue LED, and that's just a fancy term for it fading up and down. And so we're going to fade we're going to make a light in the center that fades up and down blue. And then we're probably going to put some headlights in here. Again, I got to remember where the camera is. It's got obvious headlights here that would be a shame not to light because this is one big open space. The question is making something removable to put the battery in, and it's got this nice little end cap here that fits like that, and I can easily magnetize that and make that the way to take the battery off. But it's got some really weird maneuvering thrusters on it. Show you the artwork on the cover again. These are all maneuvering thrusters. So, and they pivot around, and we're going to find a way to make sure that those can still pivot. And then I need to figure out whether or not I need to this is the little moon base, that comes with it, whether or not I need to make some sort of stand or cradle to keep this up off the ground. The first thing we can do is take all of these thruster parts off the tree here and clean them up and get them glued together. And then we have to do some alterations to this part. I need to drill out these two, which will be the headlights. And I'm going to drill out the, what is the cabin window, because I want to replace that, I think, with a piece of frosted material to go back behind there. Okay, I see one issue come up right away. I'm just building up one of the directional thrusters, and I can see where we've got a potential issue, and that is this is meant to pivot on the top of these two pieces when you put them together, and there's not a lot of glue surface there on the inside of this piece, so you have to be very careful not to get any glue down into this shaft here where the piece goes and pivots. So that's going to be a trick to make sure that nothing gets slopped into there that might bind up the pivot action. Alrighty, I've got the thrusters all, well, they're clamped. They're not, they're drying. They're clamped and drying. And now I'm turning my attention, my devious eye, I am turning to this front piece. This, I need to drill out the windows and the headlights. So I've got the Dremel and the drill bit in the Dremel. I'm trying to figure out the best method of attachment for the back while I'm at it. I'm thinking, since this is a nice big obvious joint here, that it would be the best place to put the well, obviously the battery can go back in here, but I mean it'd be the best place to put the magnets, because I've got the most surface area here without having to build up a bunch of stuff. Alright, one last thing before I clean this mess up and take things out of the clamps is I want to go ahead, I have pre-drilled this area out for the blue light. One last thing I want to do is get this cylinder, main cylinder, glued together. Everything I need to do for it, I believe I can do inside of it. I can get in here, like for example for the wiring, I can get in, pull the wiring all out through the back and then be able to push it back in, I think. But I want to go ahead and get this joint glued up and taped and let it be drying so that I can come back and give it a good sanding and cleaning, because when you've only got this main joint going down the side, you're kind of duty bound to clean it up. Okay, well, we had about a 50% failure rate, so that's not good news. Something I was afraid of happening. And this one I'm going to assume is the same way. Dang. I hope, well, this one works. Yay. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that worked and 6 that, or 4 that didn't. And when I mean worked, I mean the joint did not get bound up. As soon as I tried to turn these, they twisted right off. So the glue got into that groove, and so those aren't going to be posable, which means I need to glue them in a fixed position. So, alrighty, we're back. I've just glued these guys on, because, not the front page, I glued these guys on because I have a feeling that once I get to priming this thing, I'm going to want to have those joints already kind of faired in. Cleaned up the side seam here, cleaned that up. I'm going to leave this seam as evidence because it looks like a panel line or a hull line, so I'm going to leave that. What else I have done is I have glued in the 3 half magnets, or 3 of the magnets that are on this side that will match the magnets going in on this side, and yeah, they'll go in like that, and then that will allow me to access the batteries and whatnot. So now that those are in, I'm going to go ahead and put the corresponding ones in on this side. Okay, I've got all the magnets in. Now what I want to do before these before I start playing with them back and forth is I want to go ahead and pack the back of these just a little bit with that the 2-part white epoxy. And what that's going to do is just give me a reinforcing pocket behind the magnets in case I have to re-glue them here, and I think I can squeeze some in around the back side of that. Just belt and suspenders, because those magnets can get wonky sometimes, and it's good to have more of a mating surface for them to be glued to. So here's what I'm using. It's just JB Weld brand, although there's several different brands of this, but it's a 2-part epoxy. And this is not epoxy sculpt, but stuff that you can find at Walmart, and it's basically well, I'm stalling here while I'm trying to find another knife here. I'll go ahead and use this one. It is a 2-part epoxy. It's got a core and an outside, and you just knead it up. And it's, what I like about it is it sets up really quick. It's not like epoxy sculpt that takes overnight to get really rock hard. This will, if you don't work fast, and I really need to be working fast on this, it will set up on you. So quickly kneading a little bit of this, and I just jam it in there. This is where you use when neatness is not a requirement. So let me take a little bit of that, and I'm just gonna trying to keep it out of that central opening there, because I don't know whether that might conflict with something down the road. Okay, this will also stick to the fingers, so another reason to work quickly and carefully with it. So jammed in there. I may have used a little too much there, but jammed in it, there you go. And I've got a little bit left over, so I'm going to see if I can squeeze some into here. I might need to get one of my sculpting tools to do that. Go in behind that. If I can divide this last bit in two, then I won't have to get any more out. There you go. Jam that in there. And jam that in there. The only thing I want to be careful is I don't get any in this lip here, because that's where the 2 parts mate together. So let's take that, and let's see, what kind of sculpting tool do I have easy access to? They get lost in here so quickly. Okay, so just taking the old pointy bit here, jamming it in there, and then that will cure up rock solid in about 10-15 minutes. That's good. And that also helps because the magnets are a little loose in these holes. I use some CA to kind of put them in place, but the drill bit, you know, if it wanders a little bit, then you don't get a real tight fit. So, and I'll cut out some of the stuff that I don't need. Should have done this before I was working on the other half, but see, that goes there. Pull that out, and the last one is here, and I can pull this out. So there you go. Now I've got all of my magnets in, and I will let this sit for a bit. I'm in no rush. I'm sure it's going to work. I'm just in no rush to... Oh, look at that. I know, I was in a rush. I'm sorry. I was not a man of my word there, but here you can see that some of this is jamming, is coming out around the side of the magnet, which means it's in there good and tight. So, now we've got that. I need to start thinking about the... whatever sort of cockpit I'm going to make behind here, or get the glass ready at least. Okay, we're coming down to the end of day 1, and we've got a nice coat of filler primer on this. I'll be able to sand these main seams on the side tomorrow and get them ready for any putty or filler they might need. But things are going pretty quickly on this. Magnets are working like a charm. I'd pull them apart, but everything is wet right now, so it's going to end up sitting something like that on the base. Good morning, welcome back. It's Wednesday. Work continues on the Space Coupe. I'm starting to percolate some ideas in the back of my fevered little brain about some scratch building that I want to do on this and the lighting wear in. I want to go ahead and start painting these engines, thrusters, whatevers, but they are designed in such a way as to completely thwart the airbrushing process. I mean, look at that. Try getting your airbrush in and around all of those sides. So what I need to do is slop some paint in there with a regular brush and to get into the nooks and crannies, and then airbrush it at the last, just to even out the tops. This is when I tried to airbrush, and you can see I couldn't get into all of the creases, so or down into the bottom there. So I'm going to hand paint those and then airbrush the bits, and then they'll be silvered on the outside. And I've gone through and looked at the characters. This looks to be 1/72 scale, but if you do this and then you put your character up next to it, you can see that it is basically almost a two-level thing. So what I want to do is box out these headlights so that really, if you're standing on the deck of the flight cabin there, you would be standing above where the lights are so that you can look out the window. You would basically be doing something like that, where you're, again, trying to get this up on camera. I'm still getting used to trying to do things for the camera on the tripod. So if he's standing like that, then that kind of tells me where that deck needs to be. And it also helps light block the headlights, but that's the kind of stuff I'm worrying about right now. And also, in the midst of, now this is, I put another coat of primer on this morning, and it's looking great. I got rid of those side seams. And here's where the top light goes. So if this plugs in like that, plugs in like that, you'll notice how it expands and gets wider towards the back. I'm not going to try to, I couldn't slot something in wider. It has to be only the size of that, unless I push it in from the back, and I'm not really interested in doing that. But it does bring up another interesting issue, in that there is no visible means of egress into this. So I think what I'd like to do is to cut out a door here, design a door, and just apply it to the outside like it's a little piece of hull. I'm not going to try to make the door open or anything. I just want to, I might put an open window in it, like there's a door, like on an old bus or a plane or an airplane or a train or something. Or actually, what's influencing this the most is the look of the old Flash Gordon type of rockets. So I might put a door here with a hole in it, a viewport in the door. And now that I know that these characters are or how big they are, then that tells me how big the door needs to be. So something like about 1/72 scale, something like an inch tall door. To go on the side here, and that'll dress it up a little bit. Again, nothing that's going to be cut into it, just an applique to the outside of it. So that's going on. I found an old fader circuit here that I can use, so I'm thinking I might want to put some red and green navigation or running light bulbs on it. That might be fun, and I could bring those all the way back. Not to the rear, of course, but maybe, maybe on the sides here, something like that. That might be interesting. Well, see here, I've got the blue fading bulb here for the light, for the police light. So, and I've got headlights and everything going on here. So I may want to move them back to here, so that they're not on the same plane as the central light there. I don't know if I want to even try. Do I want to? Let's see. Do I want to? There's all the bad. Okay. Do I want to put them? No, I don't want to put them back here. I want them to be on this part. So that's what I'm working on today. But first, let me get some black paint into these thrusters. Okay. The scratch building continues, and as is my particular problem with scratch building is once I get started, I can't stop. I don't know where to stop. So it gets more and more elaborate, and which I think is ultimately going to give me a nicer and nicer display kit or display model. But look in there. What I've got is a textured piece that I'm going to use for the ceiling. and a back wall. And the back wall stops about yar. And that's because back here's where I want the battery and everything to be. But I didn't want, once I got to looking at this very nice front plate, I didn't want to put just a plain old, you know, frosted window in front of there, like is displayed on the box. See, on the box, it's like a blacked over windshield. There's some indication of detail in there, but the kit comes with absolutely no detail. You remember that was a solid piece. So rather than just putting a piece of plastic in there and frosting it and calling it a day, I decided I wanted to put some sort of rudimentary cabin in here, not a elaborate thing. I don't even know if I'm going to put chairs in it. But what I want to be able to do is put a back wall in it, which will help contain the light and all that. So here's my back wall. And again, keeping in scale, that's how big I want the door to be. So I'm going to put a door on that back wall. I'm going to be able to put a light in the ceiling, a single, get down in camera, a single light in the ceiling. That will probably be an SM LED, but I don't know of what size or what color. But that will also allow me, since this is my cabin really, that I can put a floor in it, that I can run wires to the headlights, and that all happens in here. And I have indicated kind of where the floor is going to need to be. Again, if your character is standing something like that, then your floor on the inside is going to come to about there, with the headlights below it. So I transfer that line here on both sides, and I'm going to get a solid piece to put in here that flares out a little bit, because as you can tell, that does flare. And now, of course, I wish I had done all this before I seamed, put together the top and the bottom. But having this seam done and solid and glued and sanded and puttied and primed and all that just makes it stronger, so that it's more able to take the manhandling I'm doing to it now. So what I need to do is cut a flat piece of stock that flares out like this, so that I can put that into my floor, and then I can push this back plate up against it, epoxy everything from the back, and we'll be good to go. So I'm trying to state all this so that I can keep my procedure straight in my own mind as much as anything else. What I need to be doing now is getting that floor piece in, because I can put all kinds of epoxy in there to hold it in place, and then I can put this front cap on here. So there, that's what I'm going to do. So join me for the ride. Okay, after all of the wrangling and test fitting and nibbling out of parts, I have determined that I need to set the floor in first, because that's going to give me a lot of the other dimensions. Now you may see this scary clamp on here and say, what the heck's going on? Say, Lou, what the heck's going on with the scary clamp? Go ahead, I'll wait for you. Say, Lou, what's with the scary clamp on the floor? Well, here's what the thing is. This is slightly out of round. In its natural state, it's slightly out of round. And that gives me an ugly seam at the bottom of the front cap here. So what I would need to do before I can, see, once you pull this back into round, this fits very nicely under here and here and on both sides. So what I need to do is keep this in a round orientation. I need to put the floor in and epoxy it so that it is joined, it is nice, flat, and level at that point, and sits just right. And then I can put some 1 minute epoxy on either side of it, and it will, once it's done, it will help pull that roundness back into being, because it will be epoxied on both sides, and I'll have this as a gusset that will pull things together. Once that happens, and you may see that I've got the back wall in there, I can set the back wall against it. I can use this pocket here for lighting the headlights. Many good things will happen. And then I can also put the corrugated roof line in. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw some paint on this, even though it is going to be glued on and messed on and all that, because it's going to be easier for me to touch up the paint that gets messy than it is to try to paint it all from scratch once it's in place. And I've decided I want to go with a nice blue-black floor, dark blue floor, and then I'm going to do a gray corrugated ceiling. So I can spray the primer on this, get this ready to go, and I can actually wire in the bulb that I'm going to use and then slide the whole thing in and tuck that bulb into the back area. I'm going to have to cut a couple of holes in the back wall to run chase wiring and all that, but I want to keep the wall, the back wall in place until, well, no, the back wall is only in place temporarily right now. I can still yank it out and then do the alterations and maybe paint on some of that, and I want to put another doorway indication on the back wall. So there's some decorating that needs to happen on that back wall, but before I can do any of that, I need to glue the floor in place. So let me get out the 1 minute epoxy. Well, I could probably use 5 minute epoxy. I don't need it to set up all that quick, but I do need to get this wall or this floor secured. Okay, this lovely mess is securing or trying to secure the inner ceiling liner of the front cabin. It's been some messy work. I think if I had known it was going to be this messy, I would have done this first. But then again, I am famous for doing things in reverse order. I wasn't even sure I was going to put this much of a interior in it until I saw how it looked. So this is all settling down. I've got the light that's going to light up the ceiling. I've got that wire sticking out the bottom here. I semi-painted some of this stuff in advance, knowing that I wouldn't be able to get to it again. Pardon me, I'm just doing some cleaning here. But I am fully intending that I'm going to have to go back over that paint with something a little more final when I get back to it. Man, this desk gets messy in a heartbeat. I was not intending it to get this bad, but it just junks up in a heartbeat. So, because you get lost in the heat of battle with these little plastic pieces, that you end up making more mess. And you end up pulling out tools without putting old tools away. You know how that goes. So while that is setting up, I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning and then maybe call it a day. I think the last thing I might want to do is make the box for the headlights. And I got to make sure I am doing this on camera. It's a very dangerous precedent to be putting this stuff on the tripod, putting the camera on the tripod to keep it nice and steady, but then doing everything off camera. So got to watch that. Yeah, I mean, it's getting messy, but this is the ugly before the storm before the calm, I guess. The ugly before it gets pretty again. Okay, we'll just see where we are. This is where I'm going to pack it in for the day. I've got all the supports taken away. You can see, of course, you're going to see that light in there. It's designed to be a single light on the ceiling. I've got to put the headlights in yet, but what we've got is the good start on the cabin. You can see the inside of the door here. I need to put the corresponding door on the outside, and I think what I need to do is take one of these door blanks that I have cut to size and glue it in so that you can see the detail of the door on the inside and then match it up on the outside. But ideally I can go back in and repaint some of the details that got covered up or got slopped on. And there you go. And proceed from there. I think we'll be in a very good place tomorrow to get some outside. We'll get the rest of the lighting in, but get the outside paint color on. Just at least a start on it. Okay, before I shut down for the evening, I wanted to get all the lights in. So, well, everything but the headlights. Get the marker lights and the dome light in, as well as the interior light, just so that I could have that stuff be curing overnight, because I CA'd the bulbs in and then I packed behind them with that two-part epoxy. And here you can see the light that's on the roof on the inside, as well as the big blue police light, and then the marker lights on the side, red on one side, green on the other. And that is where we are going to end it for tonight. Try some dramatic stuff with here without the lights on. There you go. Now you can see the green light. And there's the cabin light. And then there's the red marker light on that side. Okay. Do some soldering tomorrow morning to get all this stuff permanently wired in. Then we'll be able to add the headlights, shove everything into the back, and we should be able to do the rest of the body work. Oh, good morning, welcome back. All those fine greetings. It is Thursday. We are working continuously on the Dick Tracy Space Coupe with some modifications, and I was digging around in the old stash box of spare parts today, the scratch box part, and I found all of this great treasure trove of interior from the Invaders UFO that I had built for my buddy Richard, that I didn't use because he only wanted the shell. Well, I still have the interior parts, and they're 1/72nd scale, so they are the same scale as the Space Coupe. And what I was able to get out of all of that are these standing regeneration chambers for the characters to stand in, and which ironically look a lot, if you turn them around, they look an awful lot like the standing, Dick Tracy used to have these things that looked like tubes, basically, that you stood inside, and they were flying tubes. They were, I know Tracy had them first, but they were very Johnny Quest in their pseudo-futuristic look. And the Invaders UFO, like I said, uses them as regeneration tubes, but I'm going to turn them around and use them like this, and put them in as standing seats, or just equipment that is in the cockpit. And plus, I've got this great command chair with a seated figure. Now, that was one thing that the kit doesn't provide any seated figures. Well, it doesn't provide any seats because there's no interior. Can't really expect them to. But because I've got this now, I can add a seated figure and a main console that I'll be able to see through the front window. What I need to do, though, because I'm finding all of this stuff, this is what happens when you don't plan. I'm finding all this stuff now that the interior is in place, and I really couldn't have built it and slotted it in, because it is wider at the back than it is at the front. It's not a cylinder. But what I can do is, like, take just a piece of flat stock, set my chair on it, set my other chairs, lay out my interior basically, and then slot that whole thing in as the floor. And that's what I intend on doing, because then I can bring them out here, paint the chairs, do all that kind of stuff, and then glue it in place as one sub-assembly. All right, I think I've got everything buttoned up. I realize this might have been a bit of a jump since the last video, but I was doing armed combat with the wiring, and I did not want any spectators to that. But here you go. Now, forgive the fact that all these little thrusters are not in place on here. The illustration and the instructions and everything say that the ship here, let me see if I can re-aim, there you go, say that the ship itself should rest on those thrusters here. That those are actually the skid / landing gear, and that it really doesn't have anything in the back. It just kind of lays down like a clunk. I'm not a big fan of that. I would like to have it, you know, sitting on some sort of landing gear, but none are provided. Amongst the pieces of the old Invader ship that I found was this wall of instruments. Now the circumference, or the diameter, or whatever geometric term you want to use, is too wide. This is too thick. I cannot bend it down sufficiently to fit in like this, but I can cut the segments apart and put them up against the walls on the inside like this to give me the indication of some instruments, and I think I'm going to use a couple of these for that very purpose. Alright, work is continuing on some details in the cabin. And there goes the phone. Sorry about that. Well, I'm back. I'm sorry I had to stop and take the phone call. That was my pal Baldy. He was calling up about some lighting. And Baldy, if you're watching this video, you can do a retroactive freak out knowing that, yes, I just got off the phone with you as you were watching this video. But working on the what I'm calling the prisoner transport stasis module. Makes it sound so official, doesn't it? These are the regeneration chambers from the UFO, 72nd scale UFO model. And I am postulating in this universe of Dick Tracy that because this is supposed to be a paddy wagon of sorts, this at least can function as a paddy wagon. So you need to transport prisoners. I've stuck a door on that side. So I've come up with an idea that these would be the way that they would transport the prisoners. You would put them in these little booths. They would get locked in or put into stasis, just like that. And then you could safely transport them without having to worry about putting them in cages and whatnot, or putting prison bars in them. You see I put that pressure... oh, let me see, what would you call that? The big round doorknobby thing, the one of these, the thing you always see on submarine doors, the big pressure valve thing on the back door. And what I'll do is I'll just slot this in and push it back towards the center. Now you know why there's an empty spot up front is to make sure that there would be a door there. That's a lesson I learned. Again, I've got to keep the stuff in camera. That's a lesson I learned from the old Galileo shuttle, is that you don't put a chair right in front of the door. So there we have the three of them, and I just need to put the captain's chair right up front, and we will be done with that. Let me turn the lights on in here. Maybe that'll help. Okay. There you go. You can see with the light on. There you go. You can see that I'm in there. Alright, I've just spent the last hour or so, maybe a little bit more, painting all the tiny people. And I started with the prisoners because even in the future, orange is prison garb. I know a lot of this detail is never going to be seen. It's going to be tucked away in there. But I know it's there, and that's the important thing. Of course, I'm also working on Dick Tracy and his gang. These are a little bit better defined characters, and I think I'm gonna put them out on the base so that they are a little bit more visible, because the sculpting detail on those is a little bit better. And the last but not least, we have our captain, who, you will pardon me, I have painted in rather traditional captain's colors. Okay, I've got the ship up on its nose. I've just put a coat of white, flat white on it. And I know that I did that because its final color is going to be yellow. And that's a very notoriously hard color to get a good even coverage with. So I figure if I start with a white base, then the yellow will cover a lot more evenly than if I start with a darker color base. So that's the long and the short of it. Fly me to the moon. Let's go to the moon. I want to do some additional work on this and put some more grays into it. I don't think I want to put a texture on it. I would be tempted to use that sand texture paint that I always use and then put something on top of that to give me the color. But I don't think that would be the best thing for this particular base, because I don't think it would be in keeping with the tone of the rest of it. Introducing that texture when everything else is so flat, I think wouldn't do me any favors. So what I want to do is, I guess, spray some blacks or some at least very dark grays, move that out of the way, onto the moon base here. Moon base, the base that is supposed to be the moon base. And then that will give me my appreciating, and then I can spray the grays over top of that. So okay, you can see I did not go with a straight black. This is actually a German gray, although the more eagle-eyed among you might recognize that as my Godzilla base color. But now that I've got this pre-shaded, I can simply go back over. I'm just running out the cup now. No waste paint when you don't have to. Run the cup out. Alrighty, we're getting towards the end of the day and ready to close up shop, but I wanted you to take a look at this yellow submarine of a thing. Looking pretty snazzy, I think. The one area I was not able to get to all that well is right up in here. So I'm going to be spraying the regular paint, the regular Tamiya yellow, on top of that. Now I'm not worried that that's flat and this is glossy and all that, because I still have to do all of the finishing work that comes with putting decals on, which means it's going to get a gloss spray and then a flat spray over top of the decal anyway. So all I need to do at this point is do a little bit of sanding on some scratches that I can still see, and I'm going to hopefully fill in with the yellow paint. The yellow here isn't all that even either, so I'm hoping to even it out with the flat yellow spray. And the nice thing is I don't have to make it work all that hard, because most of the yellowing has been done by the rattle can. So just a few touches here and there and I'll be ready to spray. Okay, I said I was going to be done for the day, but I just did something that tickled me so well that I thought I would share. It's time to get out the googly eyes, because I wanted to put the headlight domes in here. And what I've done basically is take a googly eye that is yay big, slit the side of it a little bit so that I can get the little pupil out like this, get this part out. And then all I needed, since these were the perfect size, I needed to sand open the hole just a tiny bit and push them in from the back. I'm just using this to make sure it's nice and square. Push it in from the back, and what you end up with is two googly eyes, and they are just above the surface there. I'm careful to only push them in so far as the domes would start peeking out. And I need to adjust this one a little bit more so I can see it from the side. From the front it looked fine, but from the side it looked like it needed some more help. And what this does is it gives me headlights that are diffused enough that when I put them on here, I have a nice soft glow that is not too sourcey. You don't see the bulb because it's hidden behind the frosted plastic of the well, here's a bigger googly eye, but you can see it's got a white plastic on the back, and that's what you're seeing shining through there. Good morning, welcome back. It is Friday, and you know what that means? Sing it with me. It is the last work day of the week, and I should be able to wrap this ship up today. Last night, before I sunk my wee head down on the pillow, I put a coat of clear where the decal's going to go, so that's had plenty of time to dry overnight. And I can put that decal on today. Now, the last bits I need to do are to slot the bridge parts or the cabin parts in that I was working on yesterday. Get those glued in. Get the front put on and sealed up. And and then set it on the base. And that's really pretty much it. Little details I need to work out. I need to make a set of windows for this front opening. And here I've basically traced off what it is I'm looking for, and I can cut those out of clear PETG and slot those in and let them dry. The last thing I wanted to do, and I kind of spotted this yesterday, and I don't know whether I put it on the video or not, making a dome for this blue light here. I picked one of these, which is a 10mm LED. Now, I'm not using a 10mm LED for that. But I sanded the top of it off, bottom of it off, and I'm going to glue it down just like that. Now, it is oversized and cartoony, but so is the rest of this ship. So I think it's perfectly fine in the tone of the rest of the build. I just need to make sure that it's nice and level. I'm thinking that here's what this looks like with. Take the turntable out of the way here, but here's what this looks like sitting on the base, and that's what they say to do. Just sit it like that. No landing gear, not even a skid for the bottom. So I don't know if I'm all that wild about it. I may want to do something that at least hikes up the back end of it, even if it just means putting another rock or something here for that to sit on, just so that it levels up. And then it's going to be a question of populating the base with the character figures that I've got and putting these engine thrusters back on. So what I want to do first, before I get ready to, once I put the decal on the side, because they are huge, honking, and very large decals, it's going to limit my ability to do a lot of hand touching. So what I want to do is a lot of the hand work before I get to that point. And I want to make sure that the dome that I glue on here is on nice and square, because like I said, I have ground down the bottom of it, and I need to make sure that what I've got left is square, that the bottom of it is square to the world, so that it's not gonna, be at a weird angle once it's glued on. And then it's just a question of finishing up the. These have dried overnight. I put some clear micro scale, or the micro crystal clear in here to glue these googly eyes in place, and they are well and truly googlied. So let's, I got a small punch list here, so let's get on with the punching. Okay, you can safely ignore everything I say. I went ahead and glued this on because I had the epoxy out, and I had a good time, had a good opportunity to put that down. I'll just protect it while I'm doing any final spraying here, but I just wanted to get that thing down, and I've got the seats in, and I've got some 5-minute epoxy on it, so it's not quite set up. But what the 5-minute epoxy allows me to do, and again, I got to get this thing on camera. What the 5-minute epoxy allows me to do is some gentle nudging and persuading and sliding things around before it sets up in its final, before the glue finally sets up. So that's why I use the slower acting epoxy. Okay, I've got the windows cut out of the, this is 0.05 PETG, and maybe you can see the glare there now. They're a little bit set in. They're kind of halfway in. They're not glued to the back. They're not glued to the front. They're sitting about halfway in. And what I want to do now is put a tiny bead of the microcrystal clear around them so that they will be glued in place. And then I need to let this set for a good long while off to the side while that all dries. And then while that's happening, I can be putting the the big decals on. So okay, the diluting it down did help. Hopefully you can tell that I have run a little bead around the edges there. It may make it longer or take longer to dry, but I'm willing to risk that. And then because this is PETG and is very resilient stuff, it does not scratch easily even when you are sanding the edges of it. So that will allow me, once this is glued in and dry, to go in with a very soft rag and clean that off. So now it's just doing the side windows. Okay, it's time to start laying decals down. Each side gets the big honking Police Magnetic Space Coupe logo there, or the big wording, and they get this star. Now the star is going to push everything down. Ideally, I'd like it to go something like this, but it's going to have to end up looking something much further down. So I think what I need to do is to get these stars on both sides of the bubblegum light here. Get those laid down first so that I know that those are nice and even, because once I put on one side, I'm not going to be able to look back and forth easily, but I can gauge it off of the star. Okay, got mixed results to report here. I got the first decal down, the first main decal down, and it started breaking up. And I think that has a lot to do with the age of this decal. It's 20 years old. Like I said, this is the kit from 2000. It's also very big. That has a tendency to want to make things want to rip, because you're trying to pull all of this paper off the back, and that can cause problems. So luckily it's one color. It's fairly bold. I can go in, and it right around here on this P is where you can see the problem. And the P is for problem. And I can go back in there with some black paint and retouch that broken part and fill it in and just paint that letter with the black spaces where it's missing. And yes, it's trying to go over top of this door that I've added, but like I said, I think that's part of the problem, but I think the main problem just has to deal with the age and size of this decal. So I'm going to let it sit for a while. I was just going to go right ahead and do the other side, but no, I think I need to let that sit for a while. And I also think that I'm going to trim back some more of the carrier film here that's around these letters, so that there's not such a temptation for it to want to rip. And I'm even thinking that I'm going to cut this into smaller pieces. I think I'm going to cut this so that, let me see, trying to find a good spot in here to cut it. Do I cut it between there and there, or do I cut it there and there, or do I cut it around the halves? I think I want to cut this. I don't want to cut the bottom strip off from the top, because I like that. It gives me my spacing. I think what I want to do is cut down here between the L and the I and make this a smaller decal. Okay, I've given it a bit of a rest. So now it's time to put the decal on the other side. As I've said, I can't see what's going on over there very easily, so I can go by what the star is doing right here, and that will tell me how high up this needs to be, and then I can start laying these guys down. So I'll put that side in first. And the nice thing about this, and I was noticing it when I put the big decal in the front, is the paper curls up. You know, when you put decals in the water, it curls up and then it'll flatten back down. I was noticing that it was so wide that it was cracking the decal as it was starting to flatten back down. So by making the surface area of the decal smaller, I'm hoping to avoid some of that. but you never know. All you can do in life is try to mitigate the problems that you think you see, so that just gives more room for the problems to show up that you didn't see coming. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm on Steadicam now. I've gone in and I've painted the areas on that windowsill where I had the microcrystal clear to act as a gasket, and I like that look so much, even though it makes it look a bit like a school bus. I like it so much. I want to put black outlines around the headlights. Now, I'm not anywhere conceited enough to think that I could paint a round circle or paint a border around those, but I do know that I can cut them in vinyl, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut some thin circles in vinyl to go around the outside of here. Okay, so I've got the outlines of the headlights, and I think that looks a lot better, and it's also going to help section off the lighting that comes out of those, so I think that's a good deal overall. Okay, well, today's been a weird day for reasons I won't go into here, but we are all but done with the police coupe. What I want to do now is get a coat of clear flat over top of these decals, and then we will be ready to call this thing done. I've got two tiny details to glue on first, and for that I need to get my super glue, my CA, and let's do that and then do the flat coating. Okay, time has come. I need to spray the flat over the decals. I've got to mask off the blue light here on the top because I don't want it frosting by accident. But I want you to see the little details I put on the side. They're basically this little lens covers for the running lights on the side. Let me see, what do I need to cover that? Covering the bulb. Okay, let's get that out of here. And the last bit I need to do on these characters is to snip them off of the runner and touch up the hair or touch up the paint on their heads. Alright, I've got it finished. Got the little men glued down to the base. Did the last minute of touching up with the little people, the wee folk. All I need now is crack it open and turn it on. So let me do that. I'll set the tripod down. And then once I have the power turned on, I may kill the overhead light. But as you can tell by putting the flat spray on the decal, it got rid of the carrier film completely. So we turn that on, snap those back together. Now these are this one here is kind of loose, so I'm just setting it on the base the way that it's done in the instructions, or on the box art, which is kind of like that. And before I do that, before I set it down, let's give you a long look of what's going on inside there. Cover up that so that it doesn't, but there you can see the captain and the two prisoners inside. The headlights, I told you those rims would help cut down any overspill on the lights. And then the side and the green on this side. For some reason, even though they're both hooked up to the same circuit, the green flashes a lot better and a lot more noticeably than the red, and I think it has to do with the old red likes its own amount of voltage type of thing. But I really like how that blue turned out on the top. That's just the crystal from a 10mm sitting on top of the flat LED. And that's going to do it for this week. Quick week, 4 days, 4 out of 5, 4-day build. I'm doing this because that blue light is doing weird things to this, showing up on the ceiling. Oh, now we don't want to go through that. Oh, look at this. Look at this with the lights out. There you go. Now you can really see the prisoners and the captain in there. Nice. And then the green pulse on the side and the red pulse. It's there. It's noticeable. It's just not as noticeable as the green. And of course the blue. This has turned out to be a lot more brilliant. Not brilliant as in what a great idea, but a lot brighter than I thought it was going to be. But for a kit that started off with not much going for it in life, the fact that I wanted to scratch build that interior and did it kind of, I won't say that at the, I'm sorry, I'm looking down because I'm putting it on its base. I won't say it was exactly at the 11th hour, but it was kind of late in the game that I decided to put that interior into it. I think it came out quite nicely. Let me turn this back on so that you can see my lovely face. But I think it turned out quite nicely for it kind of being retrofit. So, enough rambling. Until next week, when I don't know what I'm going to build, but I think, oh, I know what I'm going to build. I know what I'm going to build. I promised I was going to build this. I just don't know how well I'm going to light it. I may have to dig out some, I might have to put out the call to get a lighting kit for it. So until next week, you be good. You be good to each other, and we'll see you here next time. And don't let the cops find you. Don't let the space police, the magnetic space coupe, do not let the space police track you down. Now, this feels like I should be doing a like that. Be good. I'll see you here next time.